Is the government shutdown ending? If so, how? And did Democrats just lose? Plus, are Republicans falling into the trap of believing that big government is the answer? First, you've seen the teaser, you've heard the hype, the wait is almost over. The Pendragon Cycle, The Rise of the Merlin, our biggest and most ambitious series ever, is coming exclusively to Daily Wire Plus. All access members get early access to episodes 1 and 2 on Christmas Day. Annual members can watch both starting January 22nd. And next Wednesday, November 19th, 7 p.m. Eastern, during a new episode of Friendly Fire, we're world premiering the official trailer. Right now at dailywire.com, you can get your first look at the official series artwork. The Pendragon Cycle, The Rise of the Merlin, is coming soon. The only place to watch is Daily Wire Plus. Head on over to dailywire.com/subscribe. Well, folks, at long last, well over a month, it appears that we are now nearing the beginning of the government shutdown, because last night, Democrats in the Senate caved. They gave their approval, 60-40 vote, to moving forward with a procedural vote, which would move toward the end of the government shutdown. And make no mistake, Democrats lost. President Trump wins, the Republicans win, Democrats themselves know that they lost. Now, they did get a win out of this. The win that they got was by showing that they are resistant to President Trump's agenda. They did better than they might otherwise have in places like Virginia or Georgia or Mississippi or New Jersey or even in New York. In other words, there is a very rabid base of Democrats who are very interested in resisting President Trump. But the reason that the Democratic dam is breaking regarding the government shutdown is because Democrats who are in purple states recognize that if they continue to aimlessly pound their heads against the Trumpian wall, they are going to lose their Senate seats. That's what actually happened last night. So according to Axios, which first reported what was going on yesterday, shutdown fatigue triumphed over anger among moderate Democrats in the Senate, which took a crucial procedural step late last night toward ending the country's longest government shutdown, now in day 41. The crucial Democrats folded on the party's biggest shutdown demand. They wanted a one-year extension on those Affordable Care Act tax credits, which you will recall, Obamacare already provides heavy subsidies to people living in states all across the country. The Biden administration during COVID radically increased those subsidies, just as they did with SNAP. And then Republicans were going to let those things expire because the idea is we cannot forever continue to pay additional subsidies. And Democrats lost back on the one big beautiful bill, which did in fact cut back those subsidies or allow them to expire. Democrats were attempting to use the fiscal cliff here. They were attempting to use the non-funding of the government as a way to pry open the coffers again to continue those Obamacare subsidies, which, of course, it is worth asking at this point, why Obamacare, which we were told is going to make healthcare cheaper for the federal government, that it was going to make healthcare ever so much more efficient. Why is it that now Democrats are claiming there is a crisis when Obamacare is fully funded, but just doesn't have supplemental funding added on in the COVID era? So it appears that federal workers will get paid, food assistance will flow, and flights should resume normal schedules in time for Thanksgiving. According to Axios, after final passage by the Senate, the bill, which advanced last night on a 60-40 vote, will go to the House, where it's expected to pass and then be sent to President Trump for his signature. So what exactly did Democrats get out of this? Well, they got some sort of guarantee that people who were fired during the government shutdown would come back to work. The government will remain funded until late January, and it promises a future vote, but not a guarantee on extending that Obamacare subsidy. Now, again, that's something that Senator Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, had promised weeks ago. That was one of his early offers was, okay, here's the deal. You extend the CR, and then we will, in 3 weeks, have a vote, like an open vote, on whether to extend the Obamacare subsidies. You guys will probably lose because you don't have a majority, and then we'll move on with our lives. Democrats rejected that because they were using the shutdown as leverage to apparently get Republicans to restore funding for these Obamacare supplemental subsidies. 4 former governors, Senators Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, which is a state that is very, very purplish, Independent Senator Angus King of Maine, again, a purplish state, and Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, which has a bunch of civilian federal workers, right? Tim Kaine is vulnerable because the more he votes for a government shutdown, the easier it is for his opponents to claim that he is keeping his constituents out of work. They broke the 6-week stalemate, joining people like Senator John Fetterman, as well as Nevada Senators Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen. And the thing that you notice is that all of these people are from purple states. So it's very easy for Senator Chuck Schumer from New York, not a purple state, to vote no on opening the government. Very, very easy for Senator Alex Padilla from California to vote no on opening the government. It's a blue state. Or for Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts to do so. She ain't going to lose her seat. But if you are a Democrat and you are looking at the possibility of losing your seat because you're in a purple state, then it was not in your interest for this government shutdown to continue. Angus King said It wasn't working. It's been 6 weeks. Republicans made it clear they weren't going to discuss the health care issue, the Affordable Care Act tax credits, until the shutdown was over. Jean Shaheen said, when I talk to my constituents in New Hampshire, you know what they say to me? They say, why can't you all just work together to address the problems that are facing the country? Minority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois, who's the number 2 Senate Democrat, joined 6 centrist Democrats and 1 independent to vote with the 52 Republicans, which, of course, Dick Durbin is in a very blue state. But he understands that he has to provide enough cover for these purple state Democrats to maintain their seats. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, he did what he always does, which is he basically gave permission for the vote to happen, and then he voted against it. This is his favorite thing to do. He likes to allow things that he's supposed to not allow. He likes to allow those things to happen and then vote against them to show that he really, really opposed them. So we are not clear of the woods just yet. Apparently, the Senate will come in today. Senators are supposed to finish voting on the CR minibus package, but that would require consent from all 100 senators. I cannot imagine they will get that. Instead, I assume that this whole process will be dragged out, and then the House will take up the package. The GOP leadership in the House is saying that Congress people should be on notice that within 48 hours, 36 hours perhaps, they need to be back at the Capitol in order to vote on all of this. Already coming up, the Democrats are super duper angry with the other Democrats, like the sane ones. First, there's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who served with honor. When they come home, that brotherhood, that support network they had in the military, too often it disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill that gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values. And with talk, text, plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could also be saving a lot of money. Now, again, I use Pure Talk all the time. I've been traveling a lot. That means that I literally rely on Pure Talk to talk to my kids, which is like the most important thing in my life. Head on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Make the switch today. Again, go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Switch to America's wireless company. Pure Talk, the best coverage, the best price with a company that actually shares your values. Go check them out right now. puretalk.com/Shapiro. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro. Also, do you guys ever read protein bar labels and feel like you're basically reading off the ingredients for a candy bar? Most health bars are packed with unnecessary sugar and chemicals. My team and I have tried countless bars that either tasted awful or left us hungry again within an hour. Luckily, we found Equip Foods Prime Bar. It's the first of its kind grass-fed beef protein bar with only real food ingredients and absolutely nothing to hide, with 20 grams of clean protein. Starting today, my listeners will receive an exclusive discount on Equip's Prime Bar, which has become our team's favorite protein bar on the market. 20 grams of protein in every bar. It's a lot of protein. Made with just 11 clean ingredients like collagen and colostrum, these bars deliver 20 grams of grass-fed beef protein without the bloat. They're free from whey, seed oils, artificial additives. Plus, they're naturally sweetened with dates and honey, so they taste like dessert without, actually being dessert. Justin, our producer, he loves these things. Basically, he's surviving on them at this point. If you want to try the cleanest protein bar on the market, it's already sold out once. Go to equipfoods.com/Ben Shapiro. Use code Ben Shapiro at checkout to get 25% off one-time purchases or 40% off your first subscription order for a limited time. That's equipfoods.com/Ben Shapiro. Use code Ben Shapiro at checkout. Democrats are very, very angry. Sort of typical Democrats are very, very angry at this because, of course, they had staked their political stance on the idea that under no circumstances would they reopen the government unless they got what they wanted. So just before the shutdown, for example, Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, said, we're going to keep it going. This is literally right before the Senate voted in order to shut down the shutdown. Here was Jeffries.
Well, we need to end the Trump Republican shutdown, the longest shutdown, of course, in American history. And as Democrats, we've repeatedly maintained that we will sit down anytime, any place with anyone in order to reopen the government, to find a bipartisan path forward to enacting a spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people, which means trying to drive down the high cost of living because America under Donald Trump and Republican policies has become far too expensive, while at the same time dealing with the Republican healthcare crisis that threatens to drive up premiums, copays, and deductibles to levels that will be unaffordable for working class Americans because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
I love that this is somehow a Republican healthcare crisis when Obamacare was created purely by Democrats. It was subsidized increasingly by Democrats. And so basically it's a Republican crisis if Democrats can't get the cost curve down. It's a Democratic crisis because Obamacare is a gigantic fail. It is a big fail. It has not made Americans healthier in any measurable way. and it has not bent the cost curve in any serious way. Meanwhile, Democrats, particularly in purple states, were recognizing that the shutdown was getting worse and worse. This is a point that was made by the Treasury Secretary on Sunday morning. He said the impact of the shutdown continues to get worse.
Are we starting to see a permanent impact on the economy?
Sure, George, and good to be with you. And we've seen an impact on the economy from day one, but it's getting worse and worse. We had a fantastic economy under President Trump the past 2 quarters, and now there are estimates that the economic growth for this quarter could be cut by as much as half if the shutdown continues.
And this is something that the American people were getting very, very tired of. It was beginning to hit home for people who are not government employees. People were having their flights delayed, for example. Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, he said that even if the shutdown ends, it's going to take a while for these kinks to work themselves through the system.
I think the number is going to be substantial. Again, you look at the trend line, Jake, and it's only gotten worse as we've gone through the shutdown. We're day 40 now. And, we saw the largest number of outage of controllers was on Halloween, the 31st. Those numbers were 61. Yesterday it was 81. And the controllers that I've talked to said a lot of them, we can miss 1 paycheck. They told me that virtually none of them can miss 2 paychecks. And so they're going to be confronted with the idea of, as you mentioned, going to get a side job, a second job to make ends meet, to put food on the table, put gas in the car, to pay their rent. And a lot of these controllers who are young, Jake, they don't make a lot of money. They're just getting into the business of being an air traffic controller. So they make less than $100,000 and they live in a really expensive place. They're the single income earner and they have a kid or 2 at home. It's very challenging.
Okay, so again, he's not wrong about this, and this is what purple state Democrats were feeling. Now, the problem for Democrats is that we have been highlighting for a while the split in the Democratic Party, and it is a very real split in the Democratic Party between people who actually want to get things done and people who do not want to get things done, between the so-called moderate Democrats, people like presumably Abigail Spanberger in Virginia or John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, and the increasingly progressive, wild-eyed Democrats. And so a lot of these Democrats who broke ranks here are coming under significant fire. According to Fox News, John Fetterman put out a statement saying, after 40 days as a consistent voice against shutting our government down, I voted yes for the 15th time to reopen. I'm sorry to our military SNAP recipients, government workers, and Capitol Police who haven't been paid in weeks. It never should have come to this. It was a failure. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, she said, I've consistently voted against shutting down the government because I know the pain it's causing working families from TSA agents to government contractors. We must extend the ACA enhanced premium tax credits, but that can't come at the expense of millions of Americans across our country impacted by the shutdown. She said, with the government open, we can focus on passing a full bipartisan budget for 2026. Similar sentiments from Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada, who very narrowly retained her seat, as you recall, over Sam Brown in Nevada. Very, very tight race there. She barely kept her seat. The concession we've been able to extract to get closer to extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits is a vote on a bill drafted and negotiated by Senate Democrats. Let me be clear. I will keep fighting like hell to ensure we force Republicans to get this done. But here's the thing. This was a misbegotten strategy from the very beginning. The only thing it got them was a political win because, again, it got Democrats out to the ballot box. That's all. It got a bunch of Democrats out to and I guess that is a political win. I mean, right? They did better than they might otherwise have been expected to be in, say, the Virginia House of Delegates. But they were willing to take the American people hostage, politically speaking, in order to get what they wanted here. And this is the first government shutdown that I can remember, that I can recall, in which the government was shut down not in order to exact concessions to lower spending, but in order to exact concessions to increase spending. Like, that's an amazing thing. Saying I'm not going to fund the government so I can get more funding for the government is a pretty insane proposition. And that's what Democrats were doing here. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, she said, with the government reopened, it's time to move quickly to ensure we keep healthcare premiums from skyrocketing. Senator Tim Kaine, similar statement. The legislation will protect federal workers from baseless firings, reinstate those who have been wrongfully terminated during the shutdown, and ensure federal workers receive back pay. Now, again, as I say, Democrats are very, very upset. Many Democrats are really upset. So Democrats are trying to pretend there's no crack within the coalition. Senator Adam Schiff, one of the worst senators in the United States Senate from California, just this Sunday, he was saying there are no cracks in the Democratic coalition. Well, I noticed a few.
There have been some talks in the Senate between Republicans and Democrats trying to forge a possible compromise. Is Democratic unity crumbling on this?
No, I think what we're seeing is a lot of cracks within Republicans, as you see now over a dozen Republicans in the House, for example, say they want to fix the Affordable Care Act problems. Those are the cracks I'm seeing. You see cracks, I think, even within the White House, as the president acknowledges that their lack of focus on bringing down costs, the shutdown and all its economic impacts are affecting him. They're dragging him down.
Okay, so again, this is weak tea, because as you can see, Democrats are very, very, very upset. Immediately upon the announcement that enough Democrats had voted to end the shutdown, that the shutdown will in fact come to an end, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who has her eye on 2028, put out a statement. The average monthly SNAP benefit is $177 a person. The average ACA benefit is up to $550 a person per month. By the way, we should note at this point that that's actually a fair bit of money. I mean, you're talking about 42 million Americans who are on SNAP, and you are talking about tens of millions of Americans who are on ACA. So when you're talking about increasing the federal debt and the deficit, this would be your giant driver right here. People want us to hold the line for a reason, says AOC. This is not a matter of appealing to a base. It's about people's lives. Working people want leaders whose word means something. So apparently what working people want is for Democrats to run headlong at a wall repeatedly in order to demonstrate their fealty to the principle. This, by the way, seems to be the common sort of perspective on government shutdowns. The enthusiastic members of the base constantly want members of their party to run headlong at walls to achieve, in the end, very little. Government shutdowns typically just don't work. They don't tend to work for the party that is out of power. But they do provide an excellent way for politicians to pretend to be uber committed to the cause. So, for example, Chris Murphy, who, again, I have no idea why Chris Murphy thinks that he is a thing. You're not going to make fetch a thing, my dude. And you know, as a person with pretty weak facial hair game, I got to say, Chris Murphy makes me look like Matt Walsh. Here's Chris Murphy trying to explain that it's just terrible that they ended the government shutdown.
After the elections on Tuesday, it just became absolutely clear that the American people do not want Democrats to be bullied into submission. They want Democrats to fight for their health care. They want Democrats to fight Trump's illegality. Bullies gain power when righteous people yield in the face of their wrongdoing. I didn't want this shutdown. I want it to end, but not at any cost. And of course, I wish that there was a path to saving this democracy and saving people's health care that didn't involve pain. This shutdown hurt. It did. But unfortunately, I don't think there is a way to save this country, to save our democracy, without there being some difficult, hard moments along the way.
Okay, so, you know, again, that's an angle. That's an angle. Chris Murphy attacking his own party, suggesting that his own party is insufficiently committed to the fight. Bernie Sanders, of course, has made his entire bones over doing this. This is Bernie Sanders' shtick. So here it was, old man ranting at Moon, talking about how it's very bad that Republicans and Democrats will work together to fund the government. We need the government to be unfunded so that it will be even more funded forever. Here we go, Bernie Sanders. Blah, blah, blah.
Tonight, 8 Democrats voted with the Republicans to allow them to go forward on this continuing resolution. And to my mind, this was a very, very bad vote. What it does, first of all, is it raises healthcare premiums for over 20 million Americans by doubling, and in some cases tripling or quadrupling. People can't afford that when we are already paying the highest prices in the world for healthcare. Number 2, it paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off of Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Studies show that will mean that some 50,000 Americans will die every year unnecessarily. And all of that was done to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%.
Okay, so as per his usual arrangement, all this is nonsense. The idea that 50,000 Americans will die because you didn't vote the way Bernie Sanders wanted you to vote is totally specious. There is no evidence to support this proposition. But in the end, for Sanders, again, it's always about looking for some sort of dragon to slay that never quite gets slain. But if you give him enough power, then maybe the dragon will get slain. Here's Bernie Sanders saying, America wants us to fight against Trump. That's the biggest thing. We need Americans. They want more than anything else is for us to just say Trump, 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 and then fight, and then lose, and then fight some more.
As everybody knows, just on Tuesday, we had an election all over this country. And what the election showed is that the American people want us to stand up to Trumpism, to his war against working class people, to his authoritarianism. That is what the American people wanted, but tonight, that is not what happened. So we've got to go forward, do the best that we can to try to protect working class people, to make sure that the United States not only does not throw people off of health care, but ends the absurdity of being the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. We got a lot of work to do. But to be honest with you, tonight was not a good night. Thank you.
Well, it was a double night. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, but it was a good night for him because now he gets to divide the Democratic Party even further. Already coming up, Gavin Newsom sounds off, Zohran Mamdani, AOC, the entire left wing of the Democratic Party up in arms over, people actually going back to work. First, did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life? I found a valuable tool that gives me insights to create a healthy metabolism for my body. It's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It measures your metabolism through your breath, lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, giving you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and stress management, which we could probably all use these days. All I have to do is breathe into my Lumen first thing in the morning. I know exactly what's going on with my metabolism. Then Lumen gives me a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on my actual measurements. Now, Lumen is great. It's super easy to use. You can take it on the road with you. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns food into fuel. Optimal metabolic health means easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep. Lumen provides crucial insights and helpful guidance to improve your metabolic health, but it requires effort and lifestyle changes to see the results. Winter is the perfect season to build strength from within. Stay energized, stay resilient, take charge of your metabolism. Go to lumen.me/Shapiro to get an additional 10% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Shapiro for 10% off on top of any offers or sales running on their website. Also, alrighty, folks, let's talk about something that actually matters a lot. Honoring American veterans on Veterans Day, of course. Legacy Box has been with The Ben Shapiro Show for years. They've helped preserve the memories of over 1 million families. Now they're teaming up with all of us here at the Daily Wire to give back in a major way. Legacy Box is donating 10 grand worth of legacy boxes to American veterans so those incredible stories of service and sacrifice don't just get lost to time. Here's where it gets personal. If there's a veteran in your family, head on over to get.dailywire.com/legacybox or click the link in the show notes. But even if you don't have a veteran in your life, you still have a legacy that's worth preserving. Right now, Legacy Box is giving all of my listeners exclusive access to this deal in honor of Veterans Day. Just $9 per tape to digitally preserve your family memories. Legacy Box is the world's largest digitizer. They've helped over 1 million families relive their most important moments, digitizing every tape, photo, film reel by hand right in Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you order right now, you can still get your digitized memories back in time for the holidays so you can relive those precious moments as a family. Again, I did this for my parents, and now they can see what they were like as children with their parents. I've done it for my own family. It's great. Whether it's a loved one in uniform or your family's holiday mornings, preserve those stories that shaped you. Head on over to legacybox.com/Shapiro today to preserve your family's history. That's legacybox.com/Shapiro. Gavin Newsom doing the same thing. Gavin Newsom says that the Democrats are galvanizing people with the shutdown. This sort of performative politics is very bad for the American people. Unfortunately, it has become de rigueur. The more that you yell at your own party, the more that you are perceived as authentic by the segment of the base that wants you to be president, I guess. Here's Gavin Newsom.
Bottom line is the President of the United States canceled a meeting with the two leaders because of public pressure before the government shutdown. He decided to have that meeting. He didn't invite you and others in, which for Donald Trump in and of itself is remarkable. He just instead sent out a Truth Social with Trump 2028 hats. And then he went golfing that weekend before the shutdown, shortly thereafter. He had no interest or energy into avoiding this government shutdown. He has no interest or energy to end it today. He's the president of the United States. As someone who's an chief executive of a state larger than 21 state populations combined, the fourth largest economy, you have a responsibility in that role to convene, to bring people together. That's why there's a government shutdown, period, full stop. What the Democrats, though, have done, and I give Jeffries and Schumer tremendous credit, is they've galvanized people of all political stripes, rural, urban, suburban.
Okay, so, again, this is Gavin Newsom running for president. And this is the thing. As much as these so-called moderate Democrats are voting with Republicans to end the government shutdown, The reality is their base is captured by this brand of crazy, and this brand of crazy is probably going to decide their next presidential candidate, which is why, again, while Democrats keep saying that Abigail Spanberger is the future of the party, I have some doubts. I think that Zoran Mamdani is far likelier to be the future of the Democratic Party because I've yet to see a moderate movement, a truly moderate movement arise from the Democratic Party anytime in my lifetime. Every time you think they're going to moderate, they move even further to the left. Even when they elect somebody like Joe Biden, who's supposed to be a moderating anti-Bernie influence, he then adopts Bernie's exact plan and starts implementing those at scale. Zoran Mamdani, by the way, the mask is coming off for Zoran Mamdani. It was all fun and games when he was just talking about affordability. But now, as the Washington Post is pointing out, of all places, by the way, got to point out, the Washington Post op-ed page seems to have changed their orientation pretty significantly since Jeff Bezos made some changes over there. It makes it one of the more interesting reads now. According to the Washington Post editorial board, a new era of class warfare has begun in New York, and no one is more excited than Generalissimo Zoran Mamdani. Witness the mayor-elect's change of character since his Tuesday election victory. Mamdani ran an upbeat campaign with a nice guy demeanor and perpetual smile, papering over a long history of divisive and demagogic statements. New Yorkers periodically checking in on politics could understandably believe he simply wanted to bring the city together and make it more affordable. That interpretation became much harder after his victory speech. Across 23 angry minutes laced with identity politics and seething with resentment, Mamdani abandoned his cool disposition and made clear his view of politics isn't about unity. It isn't about letting people build better lives for themselves. It's about identifying class enemies, from landlords who take advantage of tenants to the bosses who exploit workers, and then crushing them. His goal is not to increase wealth, but to dole it out to favored groups. The word growth didn't appear in the speech, but President Donald Trump garnered 8 mentions. In the days since winning, Mamdani's favorite word has become mandate. He won decisively, and now he wants to pursue his agenda. From the rent freeze to free childcare and buses, yet as mayor of New York, his control over taxes and transportation is limited. He needs approval from the state to raise taxes. His transition team includes several New York political insiders who understand how to pull the levers of power. So it'll be interesting to see whether Mamdani gets away with it. By the way, it is fascinating to see. Mamdani's first move was to go to Puerto Rico as mayor of New York, where he promptly went to a mosque and people chanted Allahu Akbar for him.
Allahu Akbar. We are so proud of you, brother, so all yours. Takbir! Allahu Akbar! Takbir! Allahu Akbar! Takbir! Allahu Akbar!
And the guy standing next to him is wearing some sort of garment that has on it the word Palestine with the Palestinian flag. I mean, Mamdani was running for mayor because that is his number one issue. It always was his number one issue from the time that he was young. Yeah, the fact is that everything else is sort of slathering over the Students for Justice in Palestine politics with a Marxist patina. Meanwhile, the biggest problem for Mamdani and for the Democratic Party is which way does the state of New York go? So it'll be fascinating because the state of New York is now a microcosm of Democratic politics. Which way does the state of New York go? Toward Mamdani or toward Kathy Hochul? So Kathy Hochul is the governor of the state. She is running a very, very tight race right now with the newly announced Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who's now the newly announced Republican candidate for the governorship in New York. Very tight race. And she has to, on the one hand, fend off Stefanik, who's critical of her, and on the other hand, fend off Zoran Mamdani, who wants to radically increase taxes in the state. And here she was saying, well, no, we're not going to do what Mamdani wants. We'll see how long that lasts, because if she loses that Democratic base, it's quite possible she loses the election as well.
I cannot set forth a plan right now that takes money out of a system that relies on the fares of the buses and the subways. But can we find a path to make it more affordable for people who need help? Of course we can. And
what about childcare, though?
Childcare, I already committed to. So we'll be on a path to get there, because I'm committed to this as a mom governor. I get it. But also, to do it statewide right now, it's about $15 billion, the entire amount of my reserves.
Okay, so again, she is stuck. She's stuck in a rock and a hard place. Meanwhile, Mamdani's hypocrisy knows no bounds. So Zoran Mamdani, of course, is reliant on other people's money, which presumably is why his victory party in New York City, according to the New York Post, was charging $22 for espresso martini coolers, $15 for glasses of Riesling white wine, and for water, like $13 a pop, 10 or $12 a pop for hot dogs. I mean, like, again, the socialism, it costs a lot of money, it turns out. Joining us online is Senator Rick Scott. He, of course, was elected to the Senate in 2018 from my great state of Florida. And he has been all over this story broken by the New York Post originally about the Zoran Mamdani mayoral campaign and how it was powered, at least in part, by foreign influences. Senator Scott, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Does it make you mad? And, we have laws in this country. Follow the law, okay? Get elected the right way. So I think, look, what we have to do on all these things is make sure people do the right thing. They follow the law, and if they don't, they need to be investigated.
So what exactly is the allegation here, and how does it violate the law?
Well, we can't take contributions from foreigners. And foreigners are not supposed to influence our elections. And so when you get a donation, you have to look at who it is, and you shouldn't be accepting donations from foreigners. And it sure appears they did. Now, after the election, they're sending the money back. But the other thing we have to look at is we need to really look at these foreign organizations that went to get out the vote and things like that, and look at the legality of that is also. Because it's not just money into your campaign. It's these groups that come in that are foreign backed or trying to influence our elections. They should not be able to influence our elections.
So, Senator Scott, I assume here we're talking about the nonprofit Decis Rising Up and Moving, called Self-Drum, and its political arm Drumbeats. What apparently, according to the New York Post, they've built the most effective field operation in city politics in recent memory. So they describe themselves as essentially a domestic program that, sure, it's filled with South Asian and Indo-Caribbean immigrants, but it's essentially an American organization. You seem to suggest, and the New York Post seems to suggest, that there is some untruth to that.
I think we got to get the facts. Let's get the facts. Tell us who their donors are and what did they do, right? And so if it's legitimate, it's legitimate. Prove it's legitimate. But it doesn't look pretty bad. And Ben, the other thing when you're in politics, what you don't want to do is do things that look bad. So if you have nothing to hide, put the information out there and let people make a good decision.
So obviously there's been a lot of suspicion also about the gaming of algorithms surrounding Zohran Mamdani. I know that there's been a lot of concern that particularly on TikTok and also on X that there is foreign bot-driven influence regarding Mamdani. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, it's what you read, but no, look, it's clear. Okay, TikTok is controlled by the Communist Party of China. It's anti-America. It's anti our way of life. It's a despicable government. Okay, that are using every influence they can. So the problem with TikTok is if you can do all the analysis you want. If you look at TikTok versus Instagram and look at how they treat the Tiananmen Square, how they treat Trump, how they do all this stuff, it's clearly anti-American values.
And Daily Wire reports, quote, independent analyses show that networks manipulated engagement to summon foreign audiences to Mamdani on Instagram. By the end of his campaign, fewer than 50% of his online engagements from viral posts came from American users, which is a complete reversal from the clear domestic majority. At the start, on TikTok, content favorable to Mamdani and hostile to Andrew Cuomo surged 55% beyond organic reach. And apparently, again, as we mentioned, on the ground, the patterns seem to be identical, that there are foreign political movements that apparently have been, at the very least, they appear to have been influencing operations inside the United States. That requires more explication. So, Senator Scott, what's the next step in investigating all of this?
Well, number one, we need to look into it. Number two, let's follow the law. Okay, TikTok has to be sold. It has to be controlled. It cannot have any control by the Communist Party of China. None. It can have none. That's the law, and that needs to get done as quickly as possible.
Well, that is Senator Rick Scott from Florida. He's all over this particular story, and we will keep tabs on it as it unfolds. Senator Scott, thanks so much for the time.
Ben, I'm glad you're in Florida. And thanks for your voice, by the way.
Thank you. One of the problems here is just for the American body politic, because one of the things that we have seen here, look, I'm pointing out the problems inside the Democratic Party. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time talking about the problems inside the Republican Party. But the American people are deeply unhappy with our politics right now. Like, truly unhappy with our politics. And I think there is a reason for that. And the reason is everyone is lying to them. And they are buying the lies. And then it turns out the consequences of those lies do not result in people awakening. They just result in people turning to the next grifter who walks up the block. I point this out because there's an interesting Wall Street Journal piece today looking at the polling data. Quote, U.S. elections are sending a consistent message. Americans are deeply frustrated with their government's inability to solve problems. The latest example arrived Tuesday in a rebuke of President Trump as voters rallied to Democrats in hopes they can better address affordability and other major challenges. That pushback was delivered just 12 months after the president swept all 7 of the top battleground states in a show of Republican dominance. The rapid-fire swing in fortunes for both parties is the result of a narrowly divided nation quick to throw out elected officials seen as slow to improve their lives. To many Americans, government is literally not working, as evidenced by a federal shutdown that is now stretched into the longest in U.S. history. So if you look at the last couple of decades, control of Congress and the White House has seesawed between the parties significantly more frequently, with the Senate, House, and White House all changing hands 4 times. Propelling the shift is the fact that many voters want bigger changes from Washington. Nationwide in the 2024 election, according to the Journal, roughly 3 in 10 voters said they wanted total upheaval in how the country is run. Now, there is a fascinating graphic that I want to show you about public trust in government, which is now near its historic lows. It is down in the 20% range. Okay, so take a look at this. Okay, back in the mid-1960s, early 1960s, trust in government was very, very high, like up near 80%. And then as government radically grew over the course of the Great Society programs from LBJ, and in the era that followed, the Nixon and Carter era, it absolutely nosedived all the way from almost 80% all the way down to below 30%. That's as the government grew. It's as the government became, quote unquote, more helpful to your lives, as the government intervened more and more and spent more and more. That is not a coincidence. As government grows, people expect more from the government. And when the government fails to deliver, they get disappointed. So during the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan said the government is not going to fix your problems, you're going to fix your problems, and I'm going to get government out of the way, trust in government went up again. You can see it in the polling data. It went from about 30% into the mid-40s. And then near the end of the 1980s, it started to decline again. It declined all the way until the mid-1990s. And then in the mid-1990s, something happened. What happened in the mid-1990s? The Gingrich Revolution. Bill Clinton started to make deals to cut the size and scope of government, including on things like welfare reform. And then trust in government started to go up again. It started to increase all the way up to 50% by about 2000. And then what happened? The government started to radically grow again under George W. Bush. People forget George W. Bush was not a fiscal conservative. George W. Bush was a quote unquote compassionate conservative. And leaving aside the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, he spent an awful lot of money. It was he who expanded Medicare Part D. It was he who expanded the No Child Left Behind Act. It was he who did steel tariffs. And the trust in government continued to decline until finally it seemed to crater out around 2010 in the aftermath of the Great Recession at around 20%. And it has been there basically ever since. So for people who are big proponents of big government, I have a question. Explain this chart. Why is it that there seems to be an inverse relationship between the size and growth of government and trust in government? If government is so amazing at everything, if government is so great at everything, why is it that in the eras where government is cut, trust goes up, and in the era where government grows, trust goes down? Why is that happening? This is a deeply important point, really important, because you have politicians on both sides who are fully incapable of just saying the truth. They're afraid the American people will get angry at them if they say the truth. The truth is, the vast majority of problems in the lives of Americans are not solvable by the government. There are many problems created by the government, skewing of markets. If you look at a chart of the products in American life that have grown more expensive over the course of the last 30 years, and the products that have grown less expensive, significantly less expensive over the course of the last 30 years, something shocking occurs. The products that have grown more expensive are all subsidized by the government. Education, college education, healthcare, health insurance, right? All these things have continued to go up because they are subsidized by the government, and the government skews the markets. And then there are, the everyday products you use, like your TV, like your phone, right? These things have all gone down. Your dishwasher, all these things are less expensive and better. Why? Because markets work to make things cheaper and more plentiful, and government makes things significantly more expensive by skewing the incentive structures. And yet no politician will say this. Every politician is doing a version of what Zoran Mamdani did in New York. It's why you see people on the right who are praising Zoran. Well, he said affordability a lot. I hear this a lot from people on the right. He did talk about affordability. And if President Trump just talks more about affordability, that means that he'll win. No, it doesn't. The party in power is going to be blamed for lack of affordability. The party out of power is going to claim that if you gave them power, they will solve the affordability problem by having more power. This is a race to the bottom in terms of centralized government control. But here's the thing. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better. Because if each party pledges that they will expand government in ways and times of their own choosing, and then they fail, and then the other party just does the same thing, then trust in government is going to continue to crater. It's going to continue to go down. We need someone, for the love of Mike, we need someone to just say the truth. I can't fix a lot of these problems. You can fix many of these problems. The best thing that I can do is get out of your way. Deregulation, lower taxes, less government interventionism in your life. Now, again, this doesn't mean getting rid of the benefits immediately that people need to live on because they've been made dependent on the government. But yes, transitional plans away from those things would be a good thing because otherwise they will eat our federal budget, as indeed they already have. If you wonder how we got to a $38 trillion debt, that is how we got to a $38 trillion debt. The convenient thing is to blame discretionary spending. It is not, in fact, discretionary spending in the main. It is the fact that people constantly come in and say they're going to solve all your problems if you just give them more money and more power and more centralized control. And then this is why people are ping-ponging between the parties. Because Republicans say that, and then they don't fix it. And then Democrats say it, and they don't fix it. And then Republicans say it, and they don't fix it. Well, at some point, the American people are going to have to get wise to this political grift. Now, Peter Thiel, he did an interview at the Free Press, pretty interesting, in which he was talking about capitalism in ways I didn't particularly like. But one thing he said is that we are in what he called a political boom market. And I think that's right. Because we now live in a time where people so little trust themselves and risk-taking and the free markets that they're willing to toss their power at any demagogue who will tell them that he can solve their problems. And guess what? Your problems ain't getting solved this way. They are not. Zohran Mamdani is not going to make your world more affordable. Tariffs, centralized government policy will not make your world more affordable. They will not. Sending giant stimulus checks is not going to make your world more affordable. We've tried it. It fails. You know what makes your world more affordable? People being left alone to produce and trade and live the free lives that they were guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution. That's what makes things better and more affordable. It's why America is the envy of the world. Every other country on earth tries this centralized government policy junk and has been trying it for legitimately centuries, going all the way back to mercantilism. The notion that if we just try it hard enough this time, it's going to fix it, I see zero evidence that that is in fact the case. Alrighty, in a moment, we'll get to the state of the economy. What is going to change? Can the Trump administration really lower the prices? First, anywhere worth going is worth going in a pair of awesome boots. And Tecovas makes finding your perfect pair easy. Whether you're a generational rancher, a lifelong cowboy, or just trying on your first pair of boots, Tecovas crafts quality Western footwear for everybody. With over 200 meticulous handcrafted steps, their boots deliver that broken-in comfort from day one. Plus, their in-store experience is second to none. Think expert staff, complimentary beverages, and free customizations to make your boots truly yours. Looking for that perfect holiday gift? Tecovas has you covered with their handcrafted cowboy boots that feel amazing right out of the box, no break-in period necessary. Whether you're shopping for someone's first pair or their 50th, they've got an incredible selection of leathers to choose from classic cowhide to exotic options like ostrich and cayman. Each boot is made by hand in Leon, Mexico, through over 200 meticulous steps. And the best part, they come in every size and style imaginable, because over at Tecovas, y'all really do mean all. Beyond boots, you'll find a great range of apparel, bags, belts, wallets for both men and women. If you're near one of their 50-plus stores nationwide, stop by this holiday season. It's a perfect escape from the chaos. Grab a specialty pour, chat with their friendly staff, take advantage of their complimentary boot branding to make your gift truly one of a kind. Do I look like a boot guy? But I do wear Tecovas boots because they're just that comfortable. They're just that excellent. Right now, get 10% off at tecovas.com/Shapiro when you sign up for email and texts. That's 10% off at tecovas.com/Shapiro, tecovas.com/Shapiro. So you cite for details. Tecovas, point your toes west. Now, the reason I'm talking here about the sort of model of politics that has broken into the mainstream and now seems to be rising on both sides is because it's not going to fix our problems. It's not going to fix our problems. If you actually want to bring down prices, if you actually want affordability, we know the things that make affordability happen here on planet Earth. They are free markets, deregulation, they are free trade, comparative advantage. That's what brings prices down. Now, that's not going to affect everybody equally beneficially. Some people are going to do a lot better than others. Some people, presumably, will be the victims of what Joseph Schumpeter, the economist, called creative destruction. Every time you have a new industry or a more competitive business that comes up, somebody loses in that particular zero-sum game. But the thing about the market is that it has many iterations. And so even if you lose in that particular game, you then get to come back and do it again and become even more competitive. And that is why free markets always drive prices down. It's why when there are people out there who are critical of quote unquote luxury products, we have to understand that everything that you now consider to be a necessity, a staple of your life, was once a luxury product. The food that you eat at your table is significantly more diverse than the food that your great-grandparents ate. Why? Because at one point it was a luxury for rich people, and then it turned out a lot of people wanted it, and there was competition to bring it to the people, and the prices went down. That was true of cars, it's true of microwaves, it's true of centralized air conditioning, it is true of your cell phone. Literally every product that you use was once a luxury product. It's why when you go back and watch the old movie Wall Street, and you see Gordon Gekko walking around with a cell phone, and everyone's like, ooh, and it looks like a shoebox that he's holding to his head. And now every single person, including the poorest American, has a cell phone. Okay, that's what free markets do. But it seems that no one is even willing to argue for free markets these days anymore. And then why are we surprised when we disappoint? Because if you keep using a screwdriver to try and knock in the nail, you're unlikely to be successful. So there's a lot of angst on the Republican side of the aisle about the state of the economy and also about the Trump affordability issues. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, who of course understands capitalism better than I do. Scott Bessent, he says that we are going to bring prices down over the next years and months.
I can tell you what we're not going to do is what happened under the Biden administration, where the administration and the media gaslit everyone and said, there's a vibe session. You don't understand how good you have it. And what happened then was we had the worst inflation 40 or 50 years, 22, 23%, but the basket of goods and services for working Americans was up more than 30%. And what we're seeing is we had to stop the increase first. Now we are starting to see prices level off, come down. Gasoline is down, interest rates are down, so mortgages are down, and I think we are making substantial progress on that. And I think over the coming months and the next year, prices are going to come down.
Okay, well, that may very well be true. I hope that that's true. I think one of the ways that prices probably come down is if sometime next year, when the Supreme Court rules on tariffs and probably strikes down a lot of the tariffs, the markets open up again, which would be very, very good. But I'll tell you what's not going to bring prices down is things like proposing 50-year mortgages. So President Trump over the weekend decided that he was going to promote what he called 50-year mortgages. That President FDR had promoted the 30-year mortgage, and under President Trump, there would be a 50-year mortgage. Okay, the problem, of course, with the 50-year mortgage is that it skews the risk incentive cycle. What a 50-year mortgage actually will do is create a bubble in real estate as more and more people take out a 50-year mortgage on which they will presumably pay tons and tons and tons of interest. And then don't worry, 20 years down the road, everybody will complain about the interest payments that they are making and how much more they are paying than the actual principal. And then we'll have a 75-year mortgage. And meanwhile, the prices will continue to go up. That doesn't generate actual lowering of prices. What generates again, when you have a supply-demand problem, increasing the demand without increasing the supply does not actually lower the price. It increases the price. If you want to increase the supply and lower the demand, or just increase the supply and maintain the same demand, or even increase supply faster than demand, you'll get lowered prices. Okay, for the same reason, when President Trump says that he is going to push out a $2,000 tariff dividend to Americans, that the amount of money the federal government has received in via the tariffs allows for the payment of $2,000 to every American family. That is inflationary. It's a stimulus check that is going to increase prices because that's just helicopter money. Helicopter money means that everyone has more money in their pocket, and then they take that money and they spend that money, and then the prices temporarily go up. None of this is counter-inflationary. President Trump put out a statement saying people that are against tariffs are fools. We are now, I assume that means Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous debt, $37 trillion. Record investment in the USA, plants and factories going up all over the place. A dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone. Well, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is like, well, I don't know about that $2,000 dividend thing.
He also promised this morning
George,
a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people. How is he going to pay that dividend of $2,000 a person?
It's not about taking in the revenue. It's about rebalancing. And the revenue occurs early on, and then as we rebalance and the jobs come home, then it becomes domestic tax revenue. The $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans.
Okay, so again, the fact that they have to keep walking this back, centralized government policy is not going to fix the affordability problem. It isn't. Historically, it has not. Name a massive government intervention that made the cost curve go down. Really, name like one. Please explain how. Unless what you're talking about is so thoroughly screwing the economy that you end up with a deflationary cycle like the 1930s. That you could theoretically do. You could really screw up the economy so badly that demand drops off a cliff. And then you have people burning their grain in their backyard to artificially inflate the prices. I suppose you could do that. Scott Bessent was trying to explain President Trump's tariffs on Sunday as well. He said the goal is to rebalance trade.
It's completely consistent that the revenues come in at the beginning, then as we rebalance, which is the goal of this, bring back high-paid manufacturing jobs to the U.S., then it will then morph into domestic tax revenues. President Trump has consistently fought for the American worker, and we are seeing trillions of investments in the U.S. that would not have occurred without the tariffs.
Yeah, well, again, I have doubts. And we'll find out if the American people feel the same way. It turns out that the classical economic thoughts about tariffs, in my view, tend to be correct. And we'll see how this all pays off. Meanwhile, the media are indeed complete trash. They have been complete trash for a very long time. This became extraordinarily clear. This is really an amazing thing. Apparently, the Director General of the BBC resigned on Sunday amid scandal after the British state broadcaster shared doctored footage of President Trump speaking on January 6th. This is according to the New York Post. Tim Davie, who's headed up the BBC for 5 years, said he was taking ultimate responsibility for recent mistakes made in a statement that was published by the BBC. Apparently, that came after it was revealed that their flagship news program, Panorama, spliced together 2 separate clips of President Trump talking on January 6th, 2021, implying he had directly told his supporters to storm the Capitol, which, of course, is not true. The program, which was aired 1 week before the 2024 presidential election, completely misled viewers by showing Trump telling supporters he was going to walk with them to the Capitol and fight like hell. But his full quote was that he would walk with supporters to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. But then the BBC cut out the part that was relevant to make it sound like he was, going to lead them in storming the Capitol. Apparently, senior executives at the BBC ignored and dismissed a series of serious internal complaints, according to a 19-page memo. And now the head of the BBC is gone, which is perfectly appropriate, but it demonstrates the lengths to which the media tried to go in 2024 in order to prop up the ailing candidacy of Kamala Harris. Pretty impressive stuff. Well, joining me on the line is 6-time Emmy Award-winning actor Kelsey Grammer. Of course, you know him from a wide variety of amazing shows, ranging from Frasier to Cheers and so much more. He has a brand new movie that just came out. It's called The Christmas Ring. Kelsey, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
So why don't you tell me the story of The Christmas Ring, at least the premise of it, and why people should go see it?
Sure. The Christmas Ring, we didn't reinvent the wheel. Karen Kingsbury has written a lovely tale about redemption, forgiveness, love, looking for love, loss, a bit of grief, and you throw in some Christmas miracle stuff, and the idea that we are children of God, and we're all children of God, and we all look for the blessings of Christmas. The redemption story, and love is what defines it all. It's for kids. It's for anybody that still cares about just their love and their life and their family, and it honors the veterans in quite a way. And it's premiering on Veterans Day, 11/11/11, which is 11th minute, 11th hour, 11th day, Veterans Day.
So let's talk about that angle of it, because it really is quite beautiful. Apparently, the film features 100 background actors who are active or retired military members. Is that right?
Right. Active duty. Yeah, they feature them in the scene. There's a scene at the end, toward the end of the movie, where they feature in a tribute to those who serve. And it's actually quite lovely. There was even a World War II veteran among them, who I think is 102 years old, named James Daniels. And it's a cool thing. I mean, my own family, my granddad served in World War II, he would have been 122 right now instead of 102. But he was quite a guy, and their lives were defined by service, and that was an interesting thing. Very great to be raised by him.
Kelsey, it does seem as though there is a revival that's happening right now in Hollywood, or at least outside of Hollywood, in terms of material that actually is friendly to conservatives, that isn't looking down at conservatives, and that actually is quality driven as opposed to sort of just pandering. What do you make of that?
Right. Well, you know what? I look on it as a kind of it's about time groundswell of a rebirth of a sense of faith and the sort of the consistent interweaving of both conservative principles, which is basically to save what's good about us, and faith, which is also that saves what's good about us. And I think those two things are twinned in the new movement. And I do think there is a sense of entertainment. People finally caught on that these people have money too, and that they'd like to see some entertainment that's geared toward them at the same time.
Well, Kelsey, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, as per one of my producers, he's very excited also, just as a side note, that you are going to be in Avengers Doomsday. So that's very exciting news as well for a lot of folks.
It was very exciting news for me because 20 years ago I did it, and we premiered the film in Cannes, and all the producers came up to me and said, "We've just cracked this whole new idea for the ongoing series." And I thought, I finally, in a big franchise, I've made it. And they said, "We're going younger, and you guys are all gone." So I thought, oh well, that's sort of it was a bit crestfallen after that, but it was a fun kind of a dish best served cold when they came back 20 years later. And I did a little revival. I did a little appearance on what was called The Marvels, and people really responded to it. It's been great. I've been going around the world actually, and people go, "Oh my God, you're back, you're beast." So it's been really fun.
Well, that is Kelsey Grammer. You can go check out his brand new movie. Again, it's coming out. It'll be available in theaters on Veterans Day. It's titled The Christmas Ring. Definitely worth the watch. Kelsey, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you. Nice to talk with you, Ben.
Alrighty, folks, coming up, we're going to jump into a little bit of foreign policy and a shocking story about apparently discriminatory hiring at Coca-Cola. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. Democrats engage in their circular firing squad, the radicals versus the traditionalists versus the moderates, and it's getting ugly out there. Plus, more economic news from the Trump administration. What actually would provide affordability? Republicans fighting over H-1B visas. And why are some supposed traditionalists now embracing polygyny, like men marrying more than one woman? We'll get to all of that. But first, join Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and me next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus, as we do what we do best: debate, discuss, disagree on the biggest stories in politics and culture. Plus, we're world premiering the first official trailer for the Pendragon Cycle, Rise of the Merlin. Don't miss it. Friendly Fire, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Daily Wire Plus. Well, the Democrats' circular firing squad continues. There's a vast battle happening inside the Democratic Party, ranging from the radicals led by people like Zohran Mamdani and AOC and Bernie Sanders, to the more traditional liberals who don't seem to have any sort of systemic immunity to that, to the moderate Democrats who are increasingly feeling out of step with their own party. Meanwhile, President Trump just keeps trucking along. Yesterday was Veterans Day, and the President of the United States spent Veterans Day speaking about the value of our veterans. Here he was yesterday.
This morning on these hallowed grounds where generations of American heroes rest in eternal glory, we gather to fulfill the sacred duty of every free man and woman. On Veterans Day, we honor those who have worn the uniform, who have borne the battle, who have stood to watch, and whose ranks have formed the mighty wall of flesh and blood, bravery and devotion that has defended our freedom for 250 years. Today, to every veteran, we love our veterans, we say the words too often left unsaid: thank you for your service. Thank you very much.
And again, President Trump has a baseline level of patriotism that comes through in everything that he does, truly. I mean, the man loves the country. Obviously, he loves the American flag. He loves the American military. That was the president at Arlington National Cemetery yesterday. And here he was, again, saying everything that we have, we owe to the military, which is something, again, the radical Democrats do not believe this.
Yet every captain of industry, every pioneer of science, and every star whose brilliance has lit up the lights of Broadway all share one thing in common. They only had the chance to soar because the veterans had the courage to serve. They took care of those people. They took care of all the stars. The stars that you read about wouldn't be here without our veterans. Everything we have, everything our country has achieved has been purchased by the muscle, spine, and steel of the United States military. We owe it all to the fierce and noble men and women of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard, and the United States Marines.
Well, contrast that with how Hassan Piker has been spending the last few days. Apparently, he went to China. And while he was in China, he decided that he was going to blather about how America is terrible in a country that legitimately censors everything you do, kills its opposition, runs them over with tanks. This was Hassan Piker literally in Tiananmen Square, where protesters against the Chinese government were murdered, talking about American patriotism.
I don't have any sort of patriotism in my heart for any... Yeah, for America, but just in general. I'm not like a very, I care about people.
Okay, well, I mean, if that is the choice that Americans are put to, and if Democrats continue to embrace this sort of radicalism, then, I think the Democrats are in some real trouble here. And the fact is, Hassan Piker is, of course, fairly close with Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor-elect of New York. He was at his party, his victory party in New York, where he was going around literally telling camera people that it was a tragedy that the Soviet Union had collapsed. And so radicals are, in fact, taking over the Democratic Party. There's no question that they are the ones with the momentum at this point if the Democratic Party refuses to stand up and say no. So, again, it's sort of fascinating, the dynamic here. Ryan Enos is a political scientist at Harvard, and he argues in his Substack, quoted in the New York Times today, that Mamdani's significance lies more in the fact that there was enough enthusiasm for change rooted in dissatisfaction with the status quo and anger at those who perpetuate it, that voters in a major election were willing to elect a true outsider candidate and to work hard enough to do so in the face of enormous establishment resistance. And this, I think, is the common thread. You're seeing it on the right also, is that anger at the status quo leads people to embrace radicalism. And when there are no leaders who are willing to stand up and either say the truth or at least to tell people who are lying that they are lying, then what you end up with is the radicals taking over the party. And the radicals in the Democratic Party and the people on the fringes of the Democratic Party, they are an increasing number of people inside the Democratic Party. This is presumably how you end up with continued violence from the left at, for example, TPUSA events. In a second, we'll get to whether the left can actually stop its radicals, plus the economy, affordability, what's the Fed going to do at the next rate meeting. We'll get to all of it. First, there's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who served with honor. When they come home, that brotherhood, that support network they had in the military, too often it disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill that gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values. And with talk, text, plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could be saving a lot of money. And Pure Talk is the company that I use. I value my phone calls, business phone calls. Unfortunately, on the phone a lot these days. Plus, phone calls with the family when I'm out of town. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Make the switch to my cell phone company today. Again, go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Switch to America's wireless company. Pure Talk, better coverage, better price, better company. Go check them out right now. puretalk.com/Shapiro. Also, sleep is your secret weapon during cold and flu season. It's literally when your immune system does its best work. But here's the thing. You can't get that deep restorative sleep if you're tossing and turning on the wrong mattress. When you're fighting off germs or trying not to catch them in the first place, having that mattress that actually supports your body and keeps you comfortable all night isn't just nice to have. It's essential. Nobody wants to be tired and run down during the holiday season. Helix knows how to make sure you're waking up at your best self. Finding the right mattress doesn't have to be guesswork. Helix makes it simple with their sleep quiz. It asks about your preferences and sleep style and then matches you with the mattress that's actually right for you. They're not just making promises. Helix is the most awarded mattress brand out there with glowing reviews from Forbes, Wired, and other trusted experts. The best part? They deliver straight to your door with free shipping, so no hauling anything yourself. Plus, with their Happy with Helix guarantee, you get 120 nights to try it out and a limited lifetime warranty. So if it's not working for you, returns and exchanges are totally seamless. It's basically a risk-free way to finally get the sleep you deserve, especially when you need it most. I've had my Helix Sleep mattress for years, firm but breathable. It improves my sleep quality. I just don't sleep the same on the road. Go to helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name into the post-purchase survey so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/Ben. On Monday, there was a protest that turned into a quasi-small riot outside a TPUSA event at University of California, Berkeley. A demonstrator whose name is Jihad de Frepolez, 25, who apparently snatched a chain necklace from one of the attendees, and that left him in a vicious fight that left the victim covered in blood. Here's what that looked like.
Break it up! Break it up! Break it up! Police! Break it up! Police! Break it up! Hey, white boy! Break it up! You're bleeding, bitch! Hey, white boy! You're bleeding, white boy! Hey, white boy! White boy! You're bleeding! Break it up! What happened? What happened, white boy?
I mean, that's a fair bit of blood on the face. And of course, you know, this sort of thing has unfortunately become not particularly rare when Antifa radicals and their allies show up at events like the TPUSA event. So, are there enough normie Democrats to stop this from taking over the party? Well, the problem for them is that the sort of normie Democrats, the liberals, the not even the moderates, I'm just talking about like the mainstream liberal Democratic Party has no systemic immunity to this sort of stuff. They are perfectly willing to go along with this sort of thing, which is why presumably they're so angry about the end of the government shutdown. Right? What Chuck Schumer did here in allowing a vote, essentially, and 8 Democrats in moderate states joining with the Republicans to end the government shutdown, that is a normie policy. The shutdown was a radical policy that was embraced for electoral purposes. And then the election was over, and then Democrats let it go. But this is prompting extraordinary angst from the liberal mainstream Democratic Party because they want to capture the zeitgeist. They want to capture what they think is the jet fuel of the radicals. So, for example, Gavin Newsom, who wants to run for president, governor of California, he raged against the end of the shutdown on X. He said tonight's Senate vote on the federal government shutdown should have been a time for strength. Instead, we saw capitulation and a betrayal of working Americans. The American people need more from their leaders. What more would it be? Like a continuation of people not getting their SNAP benefits? A continuation of the FAA not being actually functional? His press office then put out a statement, pathetic. This isn't a deal, it's a surrender. Don't bend the knee. Don't bend the knee. And that is Gavin Newsom linking arms with the radicals in his own party. Ro Khanna, he says the Democratic leadership is out of touch.
It's mind-boggling. It's just people who are out of touch, who don't understand the political moment that we're in. Look, the good news is there's a new generation of leaders. Zoran Mamdani won, Abigail Spanberger won, Mikey Sherrill won. There are people who get it. Someone jokingly, or maybe it was serious, described me as a backbencher calling for Schumer's ouster. Some people who liked me came to my defense saying, no, he's not a backbencher. I said, no, the problem is those of us in the back need to get to the front. This party needs a change in the leadership.
Okay, so again, what you now have inside the Democratic Party, to look for a historical analogy, go back to the Russian Revolution, where you basically had some soft socialists, the so-called Russian whites, led by a guy named Alexander Kerensky, who are trying to hold off the Reds. And the Reds actually started off in an unenviable position militarily, and they ended up winning because eventually there wasn't enough systemic immunity to stop them. And that's basically where it seems we are right now. The systemic immunity is gone. J.B. Pritzker, who also wants to run for president, the governor of Illinois, who must be lowered into the state capitol by crane, he says that the government should have remained closed.
I have enormous respect and always have for Senator Durbin. I disagree with his vote. I do not think that the 8 members of the Senate that voted the way that they did should have done that. I think that we had an opportunity to make sure that we were protecting people's health care across the nation. But for whatever reason, those members decided to vote the way that they did. I'm disappointed. I think that more could have been done here.
Okay, so, again, this is where the Democratic Party is going. They're following the radicals down the rabbit hole. And the Democrats who refuse to do so increasingly do seem out of touch, as Ro Khanna says. Hakeem Jeffries, the would-be Speaker of the House Minority Leader, is still out there praising Schumer, despite the fact that he actually disagreed with ending the government shutdown.
What do you think, Leader Jeffries? Do you agree with Ro Khanna? Do you think Schumer should be replaced?
Leader Schumer did not bless this agreement. He voted against it. And of course, Senate Democrats who voted no have made that clear. And what we've seen from Senate Democrats over the last 7 weeks has been part of a valiant fight that we have waged together to stand up in defense of the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people.
So again, does he seem as though he is in touch right now? He's trying to bridge the gap. I'm not sure that gap is particularly bridgeable. Maybe the last honest Democrat in the Congress is Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who points out that, a basically normie position in America, just to be generally pro-Israel, which by the polls is a fully normie position, that is the mainstream moderate position in the United States. Doesn't mean you have to back everything Israel does. Doesn't mean you have to love the prime minister of the state. But to just be generally supportive of Israel, that has now become incompatible with being a proud Democrat, according to Fetterman.
I've met with widows. Their husbands were lost in the Gaza war, and they have 8 children, raising 8 children by their own. That's a hero for all of it. So for me, it's heartbreaking. And that's been what's so difficult for me is like being devotion to Israel becoming increasingly incompatible with being a proud Democrat now too. And that's put me at odds.
And so we'll see how long this current Democratic Party can last without splitting into pieces. Now, meanwhile, the biggest threat to the Republicans at this point is indeed the economy. This has been true for a very long time. The reality is, I've been saying for legitimately months, that an economy that is on the precipice, that feels uncertain, that is not a growth-oriented economy, is going to have some problems. And so there's been a lot of angst, properly, over affordability in the United States. It is true, as the president says, that there is some hangover here from the Biden years. Obviously, massive inflation during the Biden years. And over the course of the last year, moderate inflation would be the best way to describe it. Inflation clocking in on an annualized basis to like 3%, which is too high by about 50%, but it's not like the 9 or 10 or 11% we had during some months during the Biden administration. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, he's blaming Joe Biden for the affordability crisis. And again, he's not wrong.
I think that that we inherited an affordability crisis. We have slowed the price increases down, and they are going to continue to slow down, and that real working class wages will go up, and that will address the affordability issue.
Okay, so again, that is the theory, and hopefully that is correct. Kevin Hassett, the chairman of the National Economic Council, he says that the inflation that we're seeing is actually coming down. It's moving in the right direction. Wages are going to increase. Here he was explaining on CNBC. He was asked why inflation has increased for 5 straight months.
Well, I guess if you look at it from January, there's ups and downs and seasonals. But yeah, it is surprised on the downside. People were expecting it to accelerate and it didn't. And I think that is because this growth that we're getting is not from like printing a massive amount of government debt and sending checks to people like Joe Biden did. I mean, think about it. If you look at the macroeconomic picture, the way you get inflation down is you don't have the government spend like crazy. And we've actually got a deficit reduction so far this year that's really on track by December to be down $600 billion for the year alone. And so that $600 billion reduction in the deficit, takes the macroeconomic pressure off.
Okay, so again, perhaps that's true, but Americans have to see the results. This is one of the reasons why I have been against the Federal Reserve cutting the interest rates. I was against the rate cuts. I do not think that the current rate cuts are designed to actually do what the Federal Reserve is supposed to do, bring down inflation. Again, I've always been critical of the idea that you can have an agency with 2 mandates. For example, when you look at the Homeland Security Department, that department has been tasked with both facilitating legal immigration and ending illegal immigration. That's stupid. If you have 2 separate purposes, they should have 2 separate agencies. The Federal Reserve should not be charged with both keeping unemployment low and keeping inflation low. They should be charged with keeping inflation low. Keeping unemployment low is a function of innovation. It is a function of deregulation. It should not be a function of inflationary government policy. Using the central bank as your policymaker of first resort is a mistake, and it leads to mistakes that tend to be inflationary in nature. Pretty rare that you get a Federal Reserve since the Great Depression that is deflationary in nature. They tend to favor inflation over deflation for obvious reasons. Well, now apparently the Federal Reserve is torn over an interest rate cut. According to the Wall Street Journal, officials are fractured over which poses the greater threat. Persistent inflation or a sluggish labor market, and even a resumption of official economic data may not bridge the differences. The rupture has complicated what looked like a workable plan less than 2 months ago, though investors think a rate cut at the Fed's next meeting is still more likely than not. When policymakers agreed to cut rates by 0.25% in September, 10 of 19 officials, a slim majority, penciled in cuts for October and December. Cutting rates at 3 consecutive meetings would echo the downward adjustments that Powell last made in 2019. You'll remember that what came after that was, a gigantic inflationary spiral, tapped off by COVID, but then radically accelerating under Joe Biden. A contingent of hawks has questioned the need for further reductions. The resistance hardened after officials reduced rates again in late October to the current range between 3.75% and 4%. Hawks are challenging the presumption of another rate cut. And that is why presumably Jerome Powell has been sort of downplaying the expectations that there will be another rate cut in December. Again, it's hard to see why there should be a rate cut given the fact that liquidity conditions in the United States are not actually all that difficult. They're worse than they were a few years ago in terms of mortgages, in terms of car loans, but in terms of business loans, in terms of the ability to access capital for startups. That's not a liquidity problem. That's an innovation problem. That's an uncertainty problem. It generally is not a liquidity problem. There are a lot of investors sitting on the sidelines right now because they just don't know what is coming next. The last official data released before the government shutdown showed a key measure of inflation at 2.9%, and that is up from 2.6%. That is below some of the forecasts because of the tariffs, but is that due to a drop-off in demand? We don't really know. Again, inflation in prices is a function not only of the amount of money in the economy, but also it is the effect of demand. If demand increases, then you tend to get higher prices. If demand decreases, then you tend to get lower prices. Well, again, the big question in all of this is how do you bring down prices? How do you bring down prices? Historically speaking, the way to make things affordable, the way to bring down prices is fairly simple. You increase supply. That is how prices go down. Any product, anytime, increase supply, keep demand steady, the prices go down. That is just how markets work. That is how realities work. Any attempt to do anything else is going to be at best a Band-Aid and at worst radically counterproductive to the cause of bringing down the prices. And so intervening with government-backed programs is more likely to lead to inflationary policy than the opposite. One of my favorite charts is a chart showing the differences in prices between government-subsidized products and non-government subsidized products over the course of the last 40 years in American life. Every single government-subsidized product, from education to healthcare, has skyrocketed in terms of cost. Because when you increase demand and subsidize it, you end up with higher prices. Everything the government does not subsidize, the prices have gone down because that's how markets work. And so my advice for the Trump administration is to move less toward government solutions and more toward government getting out of the way. Deregulation, yes, lower taxes, less subsidies, fewer interventions in the market economy, more growth, innovative policies. This is one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of this idea of now like a government-backed 50-year mortgage. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get to affordability. We'll get to President Trump with Laura Ingraham talking about H-1B visas. A lot to talk about. First, let's talk about something smart you can do before the year ends. Donate your car to Cars for Kids. You've heard the name. You've heard the song. Now, 1-877 Cars for Kids. Well, you can probably hum it right now. But here's what is new. Your old car could mean a tax break this year and make a difference for kids. You have a car you're not using? Why is it just sitting around? Just donate it. Have one you've been meaning to sell, but you never listed it? Well, just donate it. Cars for Kids makes it all ridiculously easy. Just go to carsforkids.org/Ben, fill out a quick online form. They'll pick up your car for free. You'll get a tax deduction, a vacation voucher for a 3-day, 2-night hotel stay, and you'll help kids at the same exact time. Here's the thing. Cars for Kids has been doing this for over 30 years, and they've taken over 1 million vehicles. So, yeah, they know what they're doing. It's the season of giving, so clear out that driveway, do some good, start the new year with a nice little tax deduction. Go to carsforkids.org/Ben right now. That's cars with a K, carsforkids.org/Ben. Again, carsforkids.org/Ben to get started. If you got that car in the driveway and ain't doing anything, why not do something good with it? Carsforkids.org. Also, in business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you only get to pick 2 of those. What if you could have all three at the same time? That's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bikes have since they upgraded to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI is the blazing fast platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment and spend less than you would with other clouds. How's it faster? OCI's block storage gives you more operations per second. Cheaper? OCI costs up to 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, 80% less for networking. Better? In test after test, OCI customers report lower latency and higher bandwidth versus other clouds. This is the cloud built for AI and all your biggest workloads. Right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. Head on over to oracle.com/Shapiro. Again, that's oracle.com/Shapiro, oracle.com/Shapiro. There's been talk about trying to make housing more affordable by bringing down essentially what you pay on your monthly payment by extending your mortgage out from a 30-year mortgage to a 50-year mortgage. Now, one of the questions is why there aren't sort of natural 50-year mortgages. Why don't private lenders just offer a 50-year mortgage? And the answer is that private lenders don't offer 50-year mortgages because in many cases they are illegal, because the amount of money that you end up paying over the course of 50 years is so much more than the actual sticker price of a house that it's insane. If you're paying a fairly low interest rate on an $800,000 loan over the course of 50 years, you'll end up paying many times the original price of the house, just in the interest, because the loan is so long. Okay, so you're actually losing money every month. But beyond that, the gamble that is being made by the lender at that point is that if you default, your house will be worth more than it was. Okay, well, maybe that's true. But the problem is you are setting yourself up basically for a second subprime housing crisis. If ever the housing market drops off in terms of prices, and all those banks then foreclose on the houses, and they have valueless assets in exchange for money that they lent out, then you have a major banking crisis that actually ends up eating the system. That's a point being made by the Wall Street Journal editorial board. High home prices are a problem, having soared 56% since January 2020. Two reasons are excessive government spending that fueled inflation and historically low pandemic-era interest rates, which of course is right. Again, when you lower the interest rates, that is a subsidy to demand. Because maybe I wasn't thinking about taking out a mortgage at 7%, but I am thinking about taking out a second mortgage at 2%. The Federal Reserve then had to raise rates to bring inflation under control. The result, average monthly payments on a new home have climbed some 80% over the last 5 years. This means fewer young people can afford a home. The median age of first-time buyers this year reached an all-time high of 40 compared to the late 20s in the 1980s. Public surveys show the cost of housing is an acute worry for young Americans. So President Trump has now been sold, apparently, on the idea of a 50-year mortgage by Bill Pulte, who runs the Federal Housing Finance Agency. The aim is to reduce monthly payments by amortizing the loan over a longer period. So instead of paying down the principal over 30 years, which is already a super long loan, by the way, most countries do not offer 30-year mortgages. Borrowers would now have 50 years to do it. So again, a 50-year mortgage, as I've said, it would cut monthly payments, but it would also radically increase the amount of interest that borrowers pay over the life of the loan. Also, borrowers may have to pay higher interest rates to compensate for the enormous risk that sometime over the next half century you're going to default. And as the Wall Street Journal points out, this has happened before. As the housing bubble inflated, Fannie Mae began buying more 40-year mortgages, which let borrowers take out bigger loans than they could otherwise afford. Borrowers were slower to build equity. Many walked away from their mortgages when the home prices collapsed. Or look at the subprime auto market. As car prices rose with inflation, auto dealers extended the duration of loans for less creditworthy borrowers. Some struggling borrowers are now turning in their keys and leaving lenders with big losses. So again, the only way to truly do a 50-year mortgage is to have some sort of government backstop. And a government backstop, you're looking at too big to fail. Repeat of 2008. It turns out that government intervention into the economy tends to create inflationary policy, not affordability. Okay, the president is, in fact, however, pursuing some policies that are supply-side policies intended to bring down the prices. One of those, for example, is the president's push for more oil drilling off the California coast. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Trump administration is poised to unveil a plan that would allow oil drilling off the California coast, according to people familiar with the matter. And of course, Gavin Newsom is eager for this. He loves fights. The announcement is expected to include a proposal for drilling around Alaska and the eastern Gulf of Mexico. That's part of the Drill Baby Drill campaign that President Trump was pushing. And that, of course, is good policy. Increasing supply is a good policy. It brings down the price. If you're worried about the price of oil, then actually increasing the supply of domestically produced oil is a very, very good thing. President Trump has said he can rapidly cut Americans' energy costs by 50% or more by expanding oil and gas production. Now, again, it'll be interesting to see who takes him up on it, because there is, in fact, a supply-demand equilibrium where at a certain point it costs more to actually drill the well than you will get by selling the oil. With that said, are we anywhere near that at this point? We are not. In April, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum directed his agency to begin to plan to develop a schedule for offshore oil and gas lease sales. The plan was part of the administration's focus on responsible offshore energy development. Again, this is good supply-side policy, and I hope that the president continues to pursue it. Meanwhile, one of the fascinating things that's happening on the right is that there are a lot of people on the right who seem to simultaneously complain about affordability, but also want to restrict the factors that lead to affordability. This is incoherent. It's incoherent. You can say there are things more important than affordability. That's fine. I agree. There are many things in life that are more important than affordability. Living close to family might be one of those things. A beautiful sunset might be more important to you than affordability, right? There are lots of things in life that are more important than affordability. However, if you are simultaneously complaining about affordability and also seeking to restrict the supply of an item, then what you are saying is logically and economically incoherent. If you want the president to create more affordability in the United States, you need the prices of things to go down. The way the prices of things go down is with more supply, right? This is very simple. Okay, this is why I find it fascinating that there is so much talk these days about H-1B visas. Okay, now, there are many problems with the H-1B visa program. You can make the claim, I think somewhat accurate, that the H-1B visa program is too broad. The H-1B visa program, about 65,000 are offered every year. Enormous number of renewals of people who have been in under H-1B visas before. I asked our sponsors over at Comet to explain this. It's a project of perplexity. H-1B visas are a U.S. immigration program that allows employers to hire foreign workers in specialty occupations that require at least a bachelor's degree or equivalent expertise. Around 85,000 new H-1B visas are issued annually. The total number, including renewals, exceeds 400,000 per year. That means somebody got an H-1B last year and now they got it renewed for this year as well. So you're bringing in foreign workers mainly in tech. Something like 50% of all H-1B visas are coming in the tech industry. They're people who are coming over to work in computer engineering or computer science or something. They're working for Intel, or they're working for Microsoft, or they're working for Google. This has become a point of contention on the right. Not because of the usual reasons that the right is concerned about immigration, but for economic reasons. So there are lots of reasons to be concerned about legal immigration in the United States. Not just illegal immigration, legal immigration. So, for example, if you are bringing in people who are low-skilled, don't have jobs, are going to be dependent on welfare and be more of a net draw on the Treasury than they are a benefit economically, that would be a reason not to let somebody into the country. Cultural differentiation, a massive reason not to let in certain people from certain countries. They might be qualified in computer science, but if they're coming here and they don't like American values, and they like terrorist groups, for example, we shouldn't let them in. Right? It's like basic common sense. And you can make the case that there are a lot of people who are being let in who are actively Chinese agents, infiltrators at our tech companies who are stealing IP. That too would be an amazing reason not to let somebody in. However, the case that's being made right now against H-1B visas is that H-1B visas are bad economically speaking in general for the American population. Now, in order to make that case, you have to make the case that they are artificially driving down the price of labor, which we can argue about in a second, and that there are no externalities that are beneficial to bringing them in, that the country is better off banning them and using quote unquote domestically supplied labor than bringing in people on H-1B visas. Now, if we're talking about pricing of labor, there's no question, obviously, that you bring in more people who are applicants for a job and the price of the labor goes down. That is a deflationary policy. Just in terms of affordability, it makes products more affordable. If labor is cheaper, products are more affordable. For the people who don't get those jobs, life is worse. For the broad American public, life is better because the affordability went up. Again, all economic policies have beneficiaries and have people who are harmed by those economic policies. The question is, how widespread are the beneficiaries and how discrete are the people who are being hurt and vice versa? Okay, let's be adults about how we discuss economics when we're going to talk about these big issues. Okay, so here is the case for importing certain types of labor. One, there are in fact certain positions in the United States that require a level of expertise that may not be reachable in the numbers that are currently being churned out by American universities. That is a shortcoming of our educational system, and it is a problem. And so you can say we should up our game. I agree. We should absolutely up our game educationally. But in the meantime, if you do not bring in the labor supply, particularly to tech, tech will go find the labor supply. And so what you will end up with is an office that was employing 30 Americans and 3 H-1B visa people. If the costs grow too high, simply moving to another country where they hire 30 Indians and 0 Americans. Right? This is the problem with the reason companies offshore is not because it's easy or fun to simply move your company somewhere else. It's because the labor cost becomes so prohibitive in the United States that companies move away. And you can try to tariff them back, but all that does is artificially raise the price on Americans. Again, we're talking about affordability. There are trade-offs in economics. Autarky comes with the fun feeling that everybody in America is making American product. It comes with the very large downside that your products are economically inefficient, they don't work as well, and you're not globally competitive. Right? All policies have trade-offs. It is also better for the American people, broadly speaking, to bring in the best from other countries. Now, how do you determine the best? You can make, again, the case that the H-1B visa program is fatally flawed. It's not bringing in enough of the best. I will point out that many of our best founders in the United States are either immigrants or the children of immigrants who came in on H-1B visas or who came in just generally without an H-1B visa through other forms of legal immigration as students. And the reality is that maybe our screening procedures should be different, but we need to see specifics on what the screening procedures you're applying are that would allow for there to be, for example, an Elon Musk American citizen creating tens of thousands of jobs. Or the head of Google, Sundar Pichai, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Or the head of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Now you can say that maybe if those people didn't exist, there would be an American who just did that job. But that is now living in the realm of theory. Okay, it's not living in the realm of reality. Brain draining other countries is also a good thing for America in terms of our own global competitiveness. I'd rather bring all the smartest people from around the globe if they are going to, again, this is assuming the precondition that they are going to assimilate to American values, that they like America, that they are American patriots. If they're not, they shouldn't come in, period, no matter what industry they're in. But if they're going to be good American patriots, creating tens of thousands of jobs is a good thing while depriving those jobs from China, from other countries. Brain draining is good. We brain drained Germany in the 1930s, and that was quite good for the American economy. We have brain drained a number of other countries around the globe, which is why America is the global economic powerhouse. So again, when we are talking about affordability, we have to talk about things like supply. And conflating all of these issues and pretending they don't exist doesn't solve the affordability crisis. It just means that we have an affordability crisis and we rip each other to shreds over sort of ancillary issues. Because I think, again, everyone on the right agrees that people who shouldn't be in America shouldn't be in America. The question is, should we bring the best and brightest here if they are going to be great Americans? And my answer is absolutely. Should we be having more people come here to found companies who are going to be good Americans? Sure. Is the H-1B visa program totally geared toward that? No. Maybe there need to be changes there. But again, pretending that we can just go autarkic, that is a mistake. The reason this comes up is because yesterday, the president of the United States was on with Laura Ingraham, and he was asked about H-1B visas, and he's being ripped up by a certain portion of the right for his answer here, which frankly, I think is mostly reasonable.
There's never going to be a country like what we have right now.
And does that
mean
the
Republicans have to talk about it, Laura.
And does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people
here.
No, you don't. We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put you.
How did we ever do it before?
Well,
I'll
give you an example. In Georgia, they raided because they wanted illegal immigrants out. They had people from South Korea that made batteries all their lives. You know, making batteries are very complicated. It's not an easy thing. It's very dangerous. A lot of explosions, a lot of problems. They had like 500 or 600 people, early stages, to make batteries and to teach people how to do it. Well, they wanted them to get out of the country. You're going to need that, Laura. I mean, I know you and I disagree on this. You can't just say a country's coming in, going to invest $10 billion to build a plant, and going to take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years, and they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, the president happens to be right about this. When he says there isn't the talent, again, people are reading that, I think, wrongly. He's saying there's not enough talent in particular industries at this time. You need a transitional skill set force to come in and sometimes teach Americans to do something. I'm not sure what's totally unreasonable about that. I think, frankly, there's a lot of demagoguery of these issues going on because people don't want to acknowledge the realities of how economics actually works. It's more fun to rail against the idea that there are any shortcomings at all anywhere in the American labor force, or that it's actually good to brain drain other countries, or that we should have the best and brightest from other places come here and engage in our economy. And again, I love Laura Ingraham. I think she's wonderful. When Laura says, if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, how did we do it then? The answer is there were a lot of foreign-born people who actually were founding some of these companies and were involved in the production of some of our most sophisticated technologies. I mean, she's talking about missile technologies, for example. I mean, it was an ex-Nazi, Werner von Braun, who was heading up our rocket program in the United States. And that's not a defense of Werner von Braun's Nazi associations. That is a recognition that importation of talent actually matters when you are crafting a dynamic economy. Of course, of course. But it seems that when it comes to affordability, people are more interested, again, in demagoguing the issues than actually talking about solutions to the issues. And if you do that, what you'll end up with is a lot of people who are angry about affordability, but get no actual answers that provide affordability. When Laura says she's interested in raising American wages, everyone's interested in raising American wages. But the problem is this. If you raise the American wages and you raise the American prices faster than the wages, then the wages get eaten up by the price increases. This is what happened during the Biden administration. You need two things: increased wages and lowering prices. And the way that you do that is with innovation and with increased supply. That is how that works. You need both of those things. I can artificially raise the wages in the city of Detroit in 1950 by unionizing the entire workforce and negotiating extraordinarily lucrative contracts. And by 1965, the American auto industry will be getting its lunch eaten by the Japanese. You can do this. And there are ways to artificially increase the price of labor. What you end up doing is increasing the price of the product that the labor produces, and that ends up making that product non-competitive, and then eventually the industry dies. Short-term thinking here is the enemy of actual economic health, robust economic health in the long term, which requires innovation and malleability of labor supply, and movability of labor is a big thing here. And again, none of this is to argue that we should have free, unfettered immigration or the United States is just an economic form. I started this conversation by acknowledging full scale the H-1B visa program may be letting in too many people. It may be letting in the wrong people. But the argument that is being made against the H-1B visa is an argument that proves too much, as we used to say in law school. It is too broad an argument, and it basically says we should simply shut our borders. And again, if what we are worried about is, quote unquote, the price of labor in the United States, and we are saying that we need higher wages, then we probably should go all the way and just ban tech. I mean, these arguments, these are not good arguments. The argument that economic health comes, for example, from artificially increasing the price of labor by restricting supply, that applies just as much to tech developments themselves, to robotics, for example, as it does to importation of labor. If you want to maintain manufacturing jobs in Ohio, and that's like the only thing you care about is increasing the actual wage paid for a manufacturing job in Ohio, you probably should ban all robotics. Because if you take a look at where all those manufacturing jobs went in the United States, manufacturing productivity did not go down in the United States. It has increased since NAFTA in the United States. The number of jobs went down, not because they were shipped to Mexico, but because robots are doing a lot of those jobs. Now, you can ban the robots. You can. It'll just make you globally and domestically non-competitive and make everybody broad spectrum poor because, again, it's not just about the amount of money in your pocket. It's about what you can buy with that money. If the price of all the goods goes up and your wage goes up, but the price is going up faster and you have worse products, you don't have a better life. And that's the thing that everybody is seeking when it comes to affordability. Well, speaking of affordability, I did an interview last week that aired early this week with Trigonometry, that's Konstantin Kisin and Francis Foster, talking about the affordability debate in New York. And one of the things that apparently went viral is somebody clearly taking something I said out of context and then pretending that what I'm saying is that the solution, economically speaking, to affordability is people just leaving their houses, which is not what I'm saying. So I want to play the full clip so people can understand what I said, and then I'm happy to explain what I meant about general affordability and about the decisions that we make in our individual lives. And so the fact that everyone's flattering Mamdani by saying, well, you know, he did talk a lot about affordability. And what I keep saying to people is, well, affordability is not like Beetlejuice, where if you just say it over and over, it suddenly arrives. You actually have to pursue policies that are likely to alleviate an affordability problem. But if your solution is always give me more power, and it does seem like that is the solution of the day from both sides, actually, then you're likely to just continue penduluming one side to the other. Because people don't want to learn the actual lesson, which is if you actually want affordability, then either you have to change policies or change locations. Those are really the only two things. And also, I think more broadly, it's not about affordability. We have trained an entire generation of people to believe that if their lives are not what they want them to be, it's the fault of systems, as opposed to decisions that are in their own control. And politicians absolutely have a stake in selling that. A lot of people in our industry have a stake in selling that. It makes people feel good about themselves and bad about the world. And the reality is, if you want a better life, you should feel better about the world and worse about yourself until you actually, go do the right things.
I broadly, generally speaking, as a matter of principle, agree with you. But I mean, I was looking around at property prices, real estate prices in New York. I'm doing pretty well for myself. I feel kind of poor looking at those things.
Oh, no, it's unaffordable. And I'm not saying it's not affordable. Right. It absolutely is unaffordable. And if you wanted to make a political difference, what you would do is you would relieve the building regulations. You would make it easier for people to build, not harder. You wouldn't rent control, because if you stop rent controlling, then that creates incentive for people to build. You would allow people to build up further. You would get rid of many of the code regulations that are kind of antiquated. Like there are things you actually could do. And then if you're a young person and you can't afford to live here, then maybe you should not live here. I mean, that is a real thing. Okay? I know that we've now grown up in a society that says that you deserve to live where you grew up. But the reality is that the history of America is almost literally the opposite of that. The history of America is you go to a place where there is opportunity. And if the opportunities are limited here and they're not changing, then you really should try to think about other places where you have better opportunities. Again, that's not saying that public policy can't change. I think it can, but I think that the solutions being offered are untenable. Okay, so I agree with me, as a famous man once said. So as you will note there, I'm offering two specific things for people to do. One is change the public policy where you're at. If you're in New York, change the public policy so that the public policy is better, alleviate some of the problems that you have with affordability by doing all the things that I'm talking about right there. And then I say that as an individual human being, if you are upset with the public policy and you feel like it's not going to change anytime in the near future, and that your life is being ruined by that public policy, you're left with two choices. One is to sit there and be miserable and fulminate against a system that is not changing. Again, if you can change the system, great, do it. Vote out Mamdani. Vote out the bad city council. Vote in somebody who understands basic economics and isn't a third worldist socialist. Do all those things. Great. Stay and fight. I did this in California for years. And then there came a point where I realized California was never going to provide me the public policy backdrop for a successful life, the kind of life that I wanted to live. And so I moved. And again, that comes with costs. I'm not pretending that moving doesn't have costs. And when I moved, I made sure that, I'm lucky. My parents were able to move with me. Our in-laws were able to move. A couple of sisters were able to move. We were able to take our entire family, which at that point was actually geographically disparate, and move into the same area. No one has talked more publicly about the importance of having a supportive family structure near you than I have. It is also true that if you're a young person, a 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, and you're not finding successful conditions in the city, and those conditions are not likely to change, if you want to seek happiness, you can either get angry at the system that's not going to change, which will not make your life better, or you can do the things that are in your control, like maybe looking outside of New York City. This seems fairly inarguable to me. That is not an argument for, quote unquote, abandoning the city or abandoning your principles or anything like that. Every individual has to make their own decision about what level of bad policy they are willing to undergo in order to maintain their status in the city. But simply shouting at the moon doesn't solve problems. It doesn't. David Harsanyi has an excellent piece over at the Washington Examiner talking about this. And he quotes one of the very online people saying, quote, "If we want Democrats to have a supermajority, this is the message for the GOP to adopt. Tell people they need to move. Don't form family bonds. Worship the banks and big corporations. My goodness." Okay, first of all, that's absurd. There is no one in America who's talked more about forming family bonds than I have. And let me explain something about forming family bonds. The reason that people in New York City are not forming family bonds is not because the price of rent is too high. That is not the reason. If you get married, there are two of you in New York City, likely both of you have jobs now sharing one space. So it is cheaper for you to get married and live with your working spouse in that same apartment complex than it would have been for you to do it by yourself. Okay, the reason that we have a marriage crisis in America is not because of economics. This is a lie. There are places all over the world that are poorer than the United States that have much higher marriage rates. In fact, one of the bizarre things about the way that the developed countries work is the more developed the country, the fewer people tend to get married and the fewer children they have. So this notion that broad speaking Americans are not having kids because they're too poor is silly. You know what? Americans were having tons of kids in the 1930s, like lots and lots and lots of kids. And then they had lots of kids again in the 40s and lots of kids again in the 50s. And then they stopped having kids when birth control became available because we were a rich country. And this is true for every developed country. This attempt to link a sort of Marxist redistributionist economics, heavy regulation and government subsidization, that's what's going to make the kids happen. I have zero evidence supports this. Zero. Literally none. Okay, but as Harsanyi says, if there's a better way to worship a bank than borrowing $800,000 on a 30-year mortgage at 6.5% for a 900 square foot home in Park Slope, I've yet to hear of it. Though no one, as far as I can tell, is arguing that the GOP should adopt moving as a central message. That's correct. I'm not saying that that's the central message. I'm saying that you, in your personal life, when you're talking about what makes your life better, be accurate about what are the things that you can do to make your life better. As Harsanyi points out, it should be noted it's a myth that all, or perhaps even most people grousing about housing costs in expensive metros are native to those cities. Most of these people would not surrender familial and communal bonds if they relocated to less expensive cities. So again, the idea that like you're living in New York because that's where your family is, for the most part, that's not true of a lot of these people. 70% of the population in Washington is not native to DC. A huge percentage of New York is not native to DC. The average home price in New York is $735,000. It's not much better in the outlying suburbs or even exurbs. None of that is considering the sky-high cost of living in the area, says Harsanyi. Years ago, a couple starting out could comfortably live in many towns on Long Island. Not today. You're paying $750,000 for a new house, not to mention outlandish property taxes in any neighborhood with a decent school district. For that kind of money, a young couple could get a veritable mansion with a pool, parks, low taxes, more opportunity, and a thriving school district in a Dallas or Indianapolis suburb. There is nothing wrong with pointing that out. That is correct, obviously. And it is also true, as I said in that tape, that the history of America is a history of people moving. As Harsanyi points out, in 1950, Detroit was a booming industrial city with 1.8 million residents, and Phoenix had 106,000 residents. Today, 640,000 people live in Detroit, and 1.6 million people live in Phoenix. Moving is not a new thing. We are moving significantly less than our parents. We are less mobile. And that is because politicians are lying to people. They are lying to you. When they say, the politicians, stay in place, we will solve the affordability crisis. And then they provide for policies that do nothing of the sort. It just makes you frustrated. And then you go to the other party who says the same thing. And then they don't do it. And it makes you frustrated. And this is why you get more and more radical politics in these unaffordable cities. But none of these politicians are going to solve that problem. Number one, the solutions they are applying are not actual solutions. And number two, they are lying to you because they don't even have solutions to these things. There's an article in the Washington Post today talking about affordable cities. And there's one in particular they point out, Pittsburgh. As real estate prices and interest rates shot up in recent years, the prospect of home ownership moved further for many Americans, especially young adults in large metro areas, where the median home price can run well over $500,000. But not in Pittsburgh. After dropping $10,000 to rehab a bathroom and decrepit kitchen cabinets, Isaac Ray and Liam Weaver bought their first home for $163,000. Though the housing market has tempered since the frenetic days of 2020, prices remain relentlessly high. The U.S. median topped $410,000 in the second quarter. That's more than 50% climb in 5 years, which of course is due to government inflationary policy. For people on the coasts, it's even higher. In LA, it's $995,000. How about Greater Pittsburgh? $229,000 with a low unemployment rate, with new industries. Private redevelopment is happening at rapid rates. Deregulation, ability to build, fixer-uppers. Again, when I made the case that personal mobility is something that people should consider, again, that's not for everybody. But this kind of bizarre notion that has set in on the right, that personal mobility is not part of the American story, that is not true. And I'm not talking about abandoning families. I'm not talking, again, we are already an atomized society. You think New York is a place that's filled with families who just don't want to move? New York? Truly? That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about singles who are living in rent-controlled apartments with a couple of roommates. New York is like the center of American familial life. The reason I'm pointing this out is because if you want to have realistic expectations of how politics works and what it can achieve, your life will be better. And if you want to have realistic expectations about how you can make your own life better, which is what we all want, our own lives to be better, we want the lives of our families to be better, then recognizing baseline realities is the key component to happiness. Ignoring reality in favor of political utopianism is a recipe for personal unhappiness. And it's not something that, honestly, people on the right should be promoting. Alrighty, meanwhile, speaking of idiocy, Vogue has now decided, in a piece by Shante Joseph, that having a boyfriend is embarrassing. Again, these are the people complaining about affordability in New York. Yeah, the people complaining about affordability are the people who write pieces for Vogue about having a boyfriend is embarrassing. I'm amazed by conservatives telling me that ultra-liberal New York and saying, hey, maybe you might want to consider moving to Nashville or Florida if you can. That somehow this is an anti-conservative point. Okay? According to this columnist, there's been a pronounced shift in the way people showcase their relationships online. Far from fully hard-launching romantic partners, straight women are opting for subtler signs, a hand on a steering wheel, clinking glasses at dinner, or the back of someone's head. On the more confusing end, you have faces blurred out of wedding pictures or entirely professional edited photos with the fiancé conveniently cropped out of all the shots. So what gives? Are people embarrassed by their boyfriends now? Or is something more complicated going on? To me, it feels like the result of women wanting to straddle two worlds. One where they can receive the social benefit of having a partner, but also appear not so boyfriend obsessed they come across as culturally loserish. They want the prize and celebration of partnership, but understand the norminess of it, says Zoe Samudzi, the writer and activist. Women don't want to be seen as being all about their man, but they also want the clout that comes with being partnered. But it's not all about image. Apparently, some people believe in the evil eye, which is that your happy relationship will make your near friends upset or something. Or people being icked out. Okay, a society that doesn't champion partnerships, that doesn't champion having a wife or a husband, is a society doomed to failure. Turns out the post-religious society is pretty bad. I also say that the post-traditional religious society is pretty bad. Right? There is a movement that is, shall we say, post-traditional biblical that is growing in size. People who are sort of reinterpreting their religious tradition in order to, I would say, tickle their fancies. There is a pastor of a small non-denominational church in Canton, Missouri, who's now making a big deal out of the fact that, according to his website, he has now taken a second wife. I don't mean he got divorced and then got married again. I mean he has two wives. And so he looks at the biblical text and he says he has two beautiful wives. My second wife is expecting my eighth child. We're thrilled for what the Lord has done for our family. And then he says, in 2019, I discovered the surprising fact that God not only never prohibited polygamy throughout the entire biblical narrative, he divinely ordained it in several cases, including David, Jacob, and Joash in the book of Chronicles. God lawfully regulated the practice of plural marriage. So first of all, if you just got familiar with the Bible like 6 years ago and you read it for the first time, you're like, hey, look, there's polygamy in, 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago. Congratulations on being able to read. And also congratulations on knowing nothing literally about the subsequent biblical tradition in Catholicism, Judaism, and Protestantism. Like, really well done here. But here he is explaining polygyny. Again, this is not a good thing.
Now, I want to share something with you. I believe, first and foremost, that all lawful marriage is divinely ordained. In other words, if the woman is lawfully available, the union is brought about by God. Starting with Adam and Eve, when God brought her to the man. Go to Genesis 2:22. This is very important. So that we don't accuse David or anyone of some kind of sin that they didn't commit. You need to understand how marriage actually works. It's not through dating websites. That's number one. Now, can God bring people together through a dating website? Sure. But here's how this works. Genesis 2:22. The Lord God fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. Everybody say, brought her to the man. I'm submitting to you with lots of scriptural evidence that as long as the union is lawful, God brought her to the man. And I can prove this over and over again. It wasn't just Eve. All lawful marriages, God brings the woman to the man. This goes for a first wife. This goes for a second wife, third wife, however many David ended up.
Okay, so it's true for all the wives. Okay, so first of all, we should point out the multiple marriages in the Bible tend not to work out particularly well. Sarah and Hagar, it doesn't work out particularly well. Rachel and Leah, it doesn't work out particularly well. Isaac only had one wife, Rebecca. It turns out that actually plural marriage turns out historically pretty poorly. Okay, so number one, there's that. Number two, basic rule of sort of interpretation of Scripture, at least in the Old Testament context, which is the one that I'm more familiar with, obviously. Just because the Bible talks about people doing a thing does not mean that the Bible is happy with people doing the thing. God orders you in the Bible to do particular things or bans you from doing particular things. But if the Bible just gives, quote unquote, permission to do a thing, that doesn't mean that the Bible is celebrating the thing. It's usually a transitional rule, which is why in the year 1000 in Judaism, famously, there's a rabbi named Rabbeinu Tam who banned plural marriage, like man married to more than one woman. In Christianity, as early as the 6th century, there are people who are already moving to ban plural marriage. It took another 1,000 years for that to be made official, but the reality is it fell out of common practice long before that. Why? Because what is the ideal marriage? The ideal marriage is described at the very beginning of the book of Genesis. A man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife. His wife, not his wives. But why is this happening? Because the guy wants attention and because he has a desire, presumably, to legitimize his own behavior. This is why tradition is good. It's why tradition is necessary. And when you just free yourself of all tradition and start freewheeling it, you end up in some pretty bad areas, whether that's secular or whether it is pseudo-religious in this way. Well, joining me on the line to discuss all of this is an actual expert on the other half of the Bible, the New Testament. I'm an Old Testament guy. He is the master of the New Testament. That would be Matt Fradd. He's the host of Pints with Aquinas, one of our new Daily Wire shows. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I reject your affirmation of me, but it is true that I have joined the Daily Wire, and I'm thrilled to be with you. Thanks, Ben.
So let's talk about polygyny, because apparently this is now a topic that is emerging once again. And one of the things that seems to happen fairly regularly is people going back, looking at the Bible, reading it without any sort of gloss, without any sort of interpretive background, and then simply saying things that have been basically obliterated by, several thousand years of religious history. There's a pastor who calls himself a pastor who's now quoting the Bible to the effect that a man should be able to marry more than one woman. What do you make of this from a biblical perspective?
Yeah, well, I would agree with what you said earlier, that just because something is described in Scripture, it doesn't mean that it is commended in Scripture. So I think it is the case, right, that we do see polygamy in the Old Testament, but that is far from saying it is somehow celebrated as a good. I think we could realize in a similar way to how divorce was permitted in Scripture. This was permitted, Christ says, because of the hardness of people's hearts. So this is the problem, I think, when you take the Scriptures and you interpret it without the magisterium of the church. Forgive me, but I have to give you the Catholic answer. Now, I think most Protestants, right, the majority of Protestants are going to condemn this as unbiblical, and they'd be right to. I don't see polygamy popular among Christians ever, even today, and it won't be in the future. But one thing I think that the Catholic has that the Protestant doesn't is a teaching office to help him interpret sacred Scripture. So just because we see polygamy, it doesn't follow that polygamy was God's idea, and Christ points us back to the beginning where it was not so. There was male and female.
One of the points you make here, and obviously for Catholics, you're talking about the authority of the Catholic Church. The sort of Jewish equivalent would be the oral tradition, which is the idea that there is an interpretive tradition that's carried down over the course of thousands of years that actually, you can go look it up, right? You can actually see what people have been saying about this sort of stuff for a very long time. That is why one of the questions that's asked very often by secular atheists is they do the same thing, right? Richard Dawkson will pick up the Bible and then he'll say, here's a verse I don't like. Right? It violates my morality and it's bad. And you'll say, well, that's because you've never looked at any of the interpretive traditions surrounding that verse. And they'll say, well, but if God's eternal, then why would he have given this scripture? Why wouldn't he have just said the thing I want him to say? And the answer, of course, is that God was giving orders to a group of people 3,000 years ago who had a different set of priors than you or I have. And so this is actually made clear. Again, I'm going to use a Jewish reference here because that's the one I know. But for example, there is a section of the Bible where it talks about the war bride, right? Where the idea that there is you go out to war, there's a woman in the war, you bring her home, you shave her head, and then she sits in mourning for her family, and then you can marry her. And this is very ugly, right? It's pretty terrible. And you read it and you say, this is really bad. And the rabbis, if you look into the tradition, thousands of years ago, they were talking about the idea that this was basically a temporary attempt by the Bible to stop people from engaging in mass rape. That's what it was. But now that we've moved beyond that, now that we've developed beyond that through a moral tradition, now we don't do that anymore. And that's not something that we should say is okay or engage in. The same thing would be true for indentured servitude, right? There are lots of things in the Bible that are pointing toward a way forward as humanity interprets the tradition, because what biblical living is, and I pronounce, I put the emphasis on living there, is the interaction between human beings who have an interpretive capacity and a God who is trying to provide them a text with which to work. And ignoring either side of that equation is a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, in Catholicism, we talk a lot about natural law. And one way to kind of describe natural law would just be to say, when you use it in accord with its nature, it will flourish. And if you use it against its nature or in a way that's contrary to its nature, it won't. So if you take a tomato plant and put it in a closet and feed it only beer, it will die because you're treating it contrary to its nature. And I think the same thing is shown in the Bible with polygamy. Every narrative involving polygamy is marked with jealousy, like you mentioned earlier, heartbreak, rivalry, Sarah and Hagar, Leah and Rachel, etc. And so, again, as a Catholic, I think there are forgive me for harping on this, but I mean, there are many sexual acts in Scripture that are condemned by the Church that the Scripture is silent on. So the Scripture doesn't directly and explicitly condemn self-abuse or masturbation, nor does it condemn pornography or IVF, obviously. Even the Scriptures that do, I think, condemn homosexual acts are quibbled with those who would like to reject it. In other words, if you're not going to submit yourself to the Word of God as your master that knows more than you and is there to direct you so that you can flourish, I think what we all have a tendency to do is to be the master over the Word of God and make it say what it wants us to say, but the results are disastrous.
Well, that is Matt Fradd. Check out his podcast, Pints with Aquinas, where you're going to get a lot of deep thinking and not the daily news. You'll actually get the actual stuff that matters. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, folks, the show is continuing for our members right now. We'll bring you some foreign policy updates from Venezuela. And also, why is the UK government now denying the Trump administration intelligence sharing? First, remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.